Today, myself and Leo had the pleasure of being able to sit down with one of the brightest and sharpest minds in the editing space. He goes by the name of Gio. Previously worked with the likes of True Geordie on his podcast and now works with the pioneer of the content creation game, none other than Logan Paul. And in this conversation, we go through absolutely everything from the start of his journey to how he got these jobs to what they actually look like on a day-to-day, and how a boy went from a media course in college to being able to create a Super Bowl halftime ad from his bedroom and working with the biggest content creator in the world at the moment. This was an incredible conversation, a great mind, a lot of insight and a lot of value. And of course, we had to get stuck into some mixed martial arts conversation as well, as always. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we enjoyed having it.
We've got so much to jump into, and I know personally that I was sitting at home, just had so many sort of questions I just wanted to sort of pick your brain about,
of course,
through your experiences. But I think the best place to start this, the $1 million question, you don't know what this is either.
Yeah, he was going to surprise you with this. He was like,
oh really?
I have no idea what he's about to say.
Who headlines UFC 300?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'd love it to be, and I feel like they're edging towards it right now, but it seems to sort of be up in the air. It doesn't look like it's like dead set to happen. But for me, I want it to be McGregor versus Chandler.
That's what I'm saying.
They've already set it up with the Ultimate Fighter. There's already a storyline there. We love watching Michael Chandler. He's one of my favorite fighters, if not my favorite fighter. And obviously the legacy of Conor McGregor. I feel like 300 needs a McGregor headline because we've not really had, obviously 100, McGregor wasn't in the mix then, 200 he wasn't there. So now we've got UFC 300. We need to have McGregor headline that just for the legacy, for the history of it, And I feel like no one would complain because right now the card's looking okay and some of the rumored fights are looking okay, but it needs that McGregor headline to just shut everyone up,
I think that's true because you chuck Conor on there and it just transcends anything, doesn't it? The only conversation I was having with someone the other day, and I'll get your thoughts on this, is I said in the short term, I said this even to you, Leo, in the short term, I think McGregor Chandler, of course, the pay-per-view numbers are insane. But I think in the long term, for the infrastructure of the sport, Dricus du Plessis, Israel Adesanya, you have Africa versus Africa, and then on the co-main, you have China versus China. I think that could be bigger.
I disagreed with this.
Really?
Personally. I said you can't beat a McGregor card.
The problem is right now, Dricus is so brand new to the scene. He's got obviously fans now because he's a champion because of his impressive win, even though it was very close against Sean Strickland. He doesn't really have that pull in the same way that like a Chandler would. And obviously McGregor's just got the ultimate pull. And also Adesanya's stock has been hit by the fact that, now we've seen him lose multiple times. Obviously the same with McGregor, but it's fucking McGregor, So I don't know. I don't know if I agree. Yeah, I feel like it needs...
That's what I'm saying. You're wrong, man.
McGregor versus Chandler would not be bigger.
I feel segregated over here. I feel like
he tried to throw this on me. We recorded last on Saturday and he tried to chuck that at me. I was like...
Yeah, no one would complain about it. It would be a great fight. It would be a great fight. And obviously the Africa versus Africa thing, the fact that there is actual genuine bad blood between Dricus and Adesanya. But the point of UFC 300 is to make it a massive pay-per-view that brings in not just the casual fans, but also... not just the hardcore fans, but also the casual fans and people that aren't even that interested in MMA. Whenever McGregor fights, usually everybody watches it, and it wouldn't have that same pull with a Dricus and Adesanya, because only the real MMA fans even know who Dricus is, which is crazy because the guy's a champion now,
I think we forget that sometimes, to be fair. Do you know what I mean? It's like obviously you're a massive fan as well. Like to us, he's like a big name, but you ask anyone out of that, like I go talk to my dad, he won't even know anyone. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't. That's like, and that represents like the overwhelming majority of people who will tune into a card like 300. Yeah. Like you're not gonna know who Dricus du Plessis is. Probably not even Adesanya. Like, that's how casual some of those fans are. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's why you need a McGregor. To be on that card.
Exactly.
For me,
it can't stand alone with just that. I think people would be disappointed. But obviously, like MMA fans would be happy, but not the casual fans.
I think that's a good point you said. Your dad wouldn't know. And I've learned as well, just being in the space personally, how new this sport is, which sort of leads me to asking you. I know you're a massive combat sports fan, MMA, boxing as well, and we'll come into that a little bit later. But how did you actually get into the sport? Because I think we all sort of realize the more you're in it, the more you realize it's still very much new, and there's still a lot of ambiguity. If you were to walk down the street and say, "Oh, do you know a Dricus du Plessis?" You'd be like, who? you know, and even just the sport in itself, they go, is that the Irish man? Yeah, that's the one. So how did you actually get into it originally?
So what ended up happening was I was always into boxing, sort of casually into boxing as a kid. Like I'd watch the Mayweather fights and Ricky Hatton fights, etc., and Tyson Fury. But then what happened was obviously McGregor and Rousey were big names, and I remember like following Facebook Lad Bible pages like that would always share McGregor's knockouts and Ronda Rousey's knockouts. So there's a few times during uni where I would like sort of wake up and put the pay-per-view on, but I just watched those fights. And then it wasn't until I started working with True Geordie, who's obviously a big name in sort of the MMA online, you know, YouTube scene, especially in the UK. And the first thing I did with him was a biopic, a documentary on Conor McGregor. So through that, I learned a lot about, you know, Conor McGregor as a person, Conor McGregor as a fighter, and also the UFC as a whole. So that we made that just before he fought Khabib at UFC 229. So then obviously, because I was so invested at that point, because I'd watched all these things about Conor and stuff, I stayed up that night. I went with my dad to a local casino, and we just decided to watch the entire card. And that card was actually a really good card. I mean, it had Tony Ferguson on there.
What a fight
yeah, do you remember? It was Tony
Pettis.
Ferguson versus Pettis. Obviously, Derek Lewis coming back and beating Volkov after being pretty much dominated for like 3 rounds, knocking him out cold. There was just a lot of great fighters on that card, and it just made me fall in love with it, like there and then. So then I remember just being at uni, having nothing to do on sort of like, you know, the pay-per-view nights, and then just whacking the UFC on. And then over time, the more you watch it, the more invested you get. And then it got to the point where I was like, I'm looking forward to this, you know, Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight. Who like a few months ago, I had no idea who she was, you know? And then you sort of start developing your favorites. And that's what's great about the UFC, and that's what sets them apart from any other MMA promotion and really anyone else in combat sports at the moment, is they are so great at building stars and getting people invested in the personalities and the storylines that also go along with that. So yeah, kind of it all started really, to answer your question, from when I did that documentary with True Geordie.
So that's quite interesting. So you say, did you get into the sport through your sort of job as an editor?
Pretty much.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What was it like working on that? Because I do sort of mini documentary style videos on my channel, and like the editing process, I find like I'm trying to get to that point where I don't click with it enough. You know, for someone like you, I feel like, you know, an editor's brain is wired differently to other people. What was that like for you working on like a McGregor documentary on that scale? Because it's quite an in-depth thing.
Well, back then, I was obviously a big fan of True Geordie, and this sort of links to the story of how I actually started working with him, because it was the first project we'd ever done. He was looking for somebody to help out in a series. He wanted to make this series called True Geordie's True Life Stories or whatever, and he wanted to basically just sit there and explain the story of whoever. And he put a tweet out one day, and I replied to the tweet saying, you know, here's a cut of a biopic documentary I made when I was at uni. It was on Afghan Dan, who's a Blackpool grime artist. And True Geordie, he replied to my DM and he straight away, and he was like, yeah, I love it. Like, when can you start, kind of thing. And one thing led to another. We ended up working together on this documentary. And it was an interesting process, because I was also coming from film school, where the making documentaries is very like, I don't know, it's very different to the way that YouTube works. So I had to like,
archaic.
Yeah, it's very like old school, the way they've got their sort of set in stone way of how documentaries should be. And then I was suddenly in a situation where not only we're making a documentary, but we're also making a YouTube video. So it has to be constantly engaging. And obviously Brian was very, very creative as well. And he had his own ideas of how he wanted things to be. I remember we used like, the music that we used was a Braveheart soundtrack. We used a lot of like Braveheart and stuff when putting the video together. But it was a lot of fun. It was very stressful, because it was my first big project. Like I was basically thrown in the deep end. But what I liked about it is it was a brand new series on the True Geordie channel, so no one had Brian had never done anything like this before. So that gave me the freedom to sort of create my own style with it. And we ended up putting it out. And I think now, if you type in Conor McGregor documentary on YouTube,
millions, isn't it?
It's on like 6 million views, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I was really proud of that. And then we made another one on Kanye, which was like way harder. And that was like an 1.5 hour documentary, which didn't do as well. But the whole process was great, yeah.
Just to rewind a little bit, because you said you went to film school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there must have been a moment, or at least a phase in your life, maybe it was when you was younger, that you realised, oh, I actually really enjoy this, whatever this may be, or I really enjoy watching films. What did that look like? Were you quite young, or was it something that you sort of got into a little bit later?
So ever since I picked up a camera when I was younger, I just love making videos. I think that's what everyone sort of used to do with cameras and stuff, like the parents and whatnot. And me with my younger sister and my cousins, we just used to film things, and we used to just like make these little things that we'd be sort of inspired by, like watching behind the scenes of sort of films and stuff, you know, when you get the little like featurettes on the DVDs and stuff. So yeah, it kind of all just stemmed from that. And then I realized I just like love doing it. I made a few YouTube channels when I was at school, obviously all failed, but like that gave me the experience. So I would pretend I had this big audience when in actuality I had like 200 subscribers, which by then it felt like 1 million subscribers back then. And I would like give myself deadlines, and I would like try and figure out how Sony Vegas worked. And I would like, back then, rendering a video would take hours. I'd have to render it overnight. I couldn't just do it in like now I can like render a 4K video in like a few minutes. Back then it was overnight.
My laptop is slow. Can't relate.
Back then I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning before school, praying that these videos would be exported so I can put them out for my 200 subscribers. It would get like 150 views, but for me it meant everything. So just through that I built up the passion, and then I went to this amazing course, shout out Blackpool Sixth Form, creative media production. And what they allowed me to do is sort of nurture that creativity. And we basically, I don't know how the course is now, but back when I was there, we were basically given like a brief. So this sort of like term for these next 4 weeks, we're going to be doing music videos. So for the first 2 weeks, you learn theory. You maybe do like an essay on like a music video, and you sort of, they break it down, what music videos should have. Same with documentaries and other things. And then for the next 2 weeks after that, you actually make a music video. So they basically give you so much creative freedom. And then we'd like, you know, critique everyone's films. And at the end of the term, whatever, we'd like watch them and stuff. And it was like a healthy competition, but that course allowed me to be like super creative. And then I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to work in the film industry. This is what everything's sort of been leading to, weirdly. So I went to do a film course at the University of Westminster, and I realized like the film industry is very outdated. You know, it's something that like, you know, if you want to work as an editor, for instance, you may not actually edit a film for like 10 years because you have to work your way up the ranks. It's very set in its ways, especially if you work for like a mainstream company like the BBC or ITV or whatever. Obviously now streaming services and Netflix are changing that a little bit, but and then I had a lot of friends around the time who were still making YouTube videos, but now actually making a career out of making YouTube videos. So the likes of sort of like Memulous, Will N.E., people like that. And I was realizing like, I kind of want to do this, but at the same time, I don't want to do another YouTube channel of my own. And at this point, not many people worked for YouTubers or like were editing for YouTubers. So I was like sort of the first wave of people that really got into doing that and actually making a career out of it. So that's sort of like how it all worked out, yeah.
Something that you touched upon there, which I think is really important, because people that listen to this, people that sometimes speak to us or reach out to us, they always ask us, how did you get input XYZ opportunity? And you said there, when it came to True Geordie, that was a case of just reaching out to him on Twitter. Now, this was a time where there were a lot less people in the industry, and I imagine it was a little bit easier to sort of get through to him. But I think that was super important that you touched on. And just going back to what you said in regards to when it comes to filmmaking, and you say about it being outdated and it taking so long to actually get to something that you want to do, I think that's a really, really good point. When you first started creating these videos, when it was in film school, when you were doing these briefs, for example, were you watching other people to sort of take inspiration, or did you sit down and you sort of, sometimes people find their voice and their style very quickly, or did that take quite a little while to sort of form for you?
Are you saying like, do I look up to sort of filmmakers and try and emulate the style?
Yeah, so like when you started, was there someone, or were there a collective of people that you'd sort of draw inspiration from? Or did you sort of start and say, have a clear idea of, okay, I really like to do it this certain way? Or was it a little mix of sort of both maybe?
So yeah, I think it was a mix of like a few different people. I wouldn't say there was a certain person that really inspired me. Obviously I looked up to the greats like, you know, Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, Alfonso Aranitu, people that sort of changed Hollywood, the French New Wave era, Jean-Luc Godard, Francois Truffaut, people like that. And I would like watch a lot of their films, and I would like take little things that I liked, especially with Tarantino. I was doing a lot of sort of Tarantino-esque things around that time, and things that I'd watched on Netflix. And all those things inspired me, but I don't know if I like had a single person.
You got a favorite movie at all?
My favorite film?
Yeah. Wow.
My favorite film is...
Sorry, I sort of jumped you there with that one.
No. My favorite film of all time, for many different reasons, is E.T. Steven Spielberg.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that.
I know it's kind of, obviously it's one of the biggest films of all time, but for me it holds sentimental value, and as a film, the way that it's told, storytelling wise, it's just like, in my opinion, just a perfect film.
I think there's something to say in that you did that course in, at sixth form, because for me personally, I did film studies at GCSE and A level, but it was a lot more theory based, and it's just sort of talking about film, which is obviously more analysis based. The fact you get more of a hands on approach,
Exactly.
at sixth form, that's so valuable.
Yeah.
And did you go so where was the sort of steps beyond that? Where did you move beyond that after
So it's
after finishing
interesting.
sixth form?
I can't sing creative media production at Blackpool Sixth Form's praises enough, because it was such a great course, and it actually helped me so much do what I do now, because they, as you said, your course was very theory based. There was obviously a theory element to what they taught us, but it was most focused on sort of the practical elements of creating, which is super important. It's a creative course. Having hands-on experience and going out and trial and error, and having that healthy competition between you and other groups and friends of yours, pushed you to create the best quality content possible. And it's funny because when I then went to uni and I was sort of learning about film and wanted to go in the film industry, I realized it's so outdated. And the YouTube side of it, where it's everyone's so for instance, I'm an editor, but I'm also doing all these different other things too. It's very similar to how it was at Blackpool Sixth Form, because you're in sort of small groups. So now, instead of me and sort of my friends Josh and Alfie, it's now me and Logan, or me and True Geordie, and it's the same sort of thing. So I always love that hands-on experience, and that's how it helped get to that point, if you know what I mean.
You took a little jump there from, so you were doing film studies, and then you was making films, and then you reached out to True Geordie on Twitter, X.
It's Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, I completely agree.
You know
I'm
what I
so
realised?
sick of people calling it eggs.
You know what I realised? You have to have 2 syllables in a name. Twitter.
Yeah, it doesn't roll off the
Or
tongue.
multiple.
Facebook,
You have
YouTube
to have
works.
multiple. And I kept thinking, why is X not ringing? And then I realised that no big brand has a single syllable.
Apple, Twitter. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Microsoft. That's 3.
Spotify. Yeah, that's 3.
Multiple,
Spotify,
right?
yeah.
So
Multiple, yeah.
2, 3, or multiple.
Bing. No, but that Bing's...
No one likes
Where is Bing?
Yeah.
Where is it? Exactly.
Edge as well.
So yeah,
No one likes that.
you jump from obviously film studies to there, but I know, just having a look through, going quite deep into your socials, I know that in even 2016, so that would have been the time that you probably just left sixth form and started going to university, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
I always get nervous when people start going, I've had a deep dive into your socials and stuff.
No.
So I'm always going to bring up old tweets and things.
You know what? I was tempted, because I've seen people do that before. It's always funny. You go into when you're 13 and it's great day at school with my mates and things like that. But
With my N-words. And
Yeah.
it's like,
We've got a lot of PR to do. No, but I just wanted to ask, because sometimes you hear people talk about their journey and their story similar to you there. And I think because there's so many things that are happening, we sometimes jump some steps. But I realized in 2016 that you were actually on the streets interviewing people, even with a microphone. So that's quite a big thing now to even do, to have the confidence and to have the balls to go out and have these conversations with people, especially if they're known in certain industries. And in 2016, that wasn't a thing, really. That really wasn't a thing. What sort of prompted you to do that?
So I would be very inspired by a lot of the early days of YouTubers. So sort of what I got that from, I don't know if you ever heard of Kasim G.
Oh yeah.
Kasim G,
He's
you
an
remember,
OG.
the California On series?
Yeah.
So basically, for those who don't know, Kasim G was one of the original OG YouTubers. He had some great series. Going Deep was one of his big series, but his most popular one was called California On. And that's where he would he'd sit on Venice Beach, stand on Venice Beach, and would interview people about different topics. So California On conservatism, California On weed, California On, and it'll be basically all these crazy different things. So me doing that was kind of sort of just not parodied, but being sort of influenced by the likes of Kasim G, I would say. But then I kind of just did that because I was bored at uni. I think what you're referencing there is when I did I went to, Trump had just won the election, and then he had the Muslim ban thing. and then he was going to come make a state visit in the UK. So they did these huge protests, and I've never really been one to like go to protests, but I just gone to uni, and I was sort of feeling this sort of urge to create stuff because, as I said, like I was on this course where I was constantly creating things, and now I'm at uni and I'm sitting in lectures, and I'm like, this is boring. I want to create something. So I got a few of my friends, and I was like, let's just go to the protest. Let's just interview people, and I didn't want to go and start doing serious interviews of people. So I was trying to like have that sort of Kasim G style where I was, interviewing people, but also just trying to make jokes out of it and stuff. So yeah.
What was that like doing that for the first time? Because I know for me personally, things like that are quite nerve wracking. And I know for other people, they can find it quite nerve wracking. Or was that quite natural for you?
Interesting. I've never really had a problem being in front of camera. So I don't, maybe because I did it from such a young age. I had all these other YouTube channels when I was younger and stuff. So I never really had that sort of like stage fright of going up to someone and speaking to people. I don't know. I don't really.
It's quite an interesting contrast because now obviously what you do being an editor, like I know from experience, it's quite a solitary thing. Maybe obviously in the sort of higher stages of the way you do it, it might be less so, but that's quite a contrast going from interviewing people on the street, quite an extroverted thing.
I didn't do it that many times though. I think I only did it once. Yeah. Or like maybe like max twice. But I don't think I'd have a problem doing it like now.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because being in front of camera, I believe personally, is a muscle, and it's just a muscle that you build up over time. And like yourself, if you're in that environment from young, you get quite desensitized to it. You almost forget it's there, and rather than sort of building it up as this big image that sometimes people do in their head now, and then they get very nervous and then close up.
Do you know what it is though? Ultimately, what makes you comfortable in front of camera is not giving a shit what the people watching are like perceiving. Because generally, if you're talking to a camera, the only reason you'd be nervous is because you're thinking, oh my gosh, what if my ex-girlfriend from high school sees this, or whoever sees this? Like, if you just don't care about those things and just be able to relax, then it don't matter.
100%. That was, even when I started, you have that in your head. Even the cool kids at school, what if they see it?
It's like you're literally like a grown man.
Legit,
like
I'm thinking, I'm an actual adult here. And I know we're jumping about a little bit here, but I just want to go back to what you said when you got stuck into True Geordie, because obviously that's such a,
so to speak.
It was only your face that realised my choice of words was absolutely
I didn't want to say anything.
Terrible. And usually I pick up on things like that. I think, why is he looking at me like that? Is that not a normal thing?
I was silent.
So, yeah, big pause.
Yeah.
Once you got stuck into the role at True Geordie of being an editor, I should probably say, that's quite a big responsibility for someone fresh into the industry, someone with no experience. And you said there you got thrown in at the deep end, and I personally always believe that's probably the better way to go, is sink or swim. You've got no choice. What did that, if you actually look at it a little bit more operationally in regards to what you've done on the first McGregor documentary, let's say, what did that look like? You get into work for the first time, what do they say to you? Okay.
Yeah, it was super interesting actually, because I didn't have no experience. So True Geordie wasn't actually the first YouTuber I'd worked for. Prior to that, as I mentioned before, I was friends with a lot of these sort of up and coming YouTubers at the time who are now huge successes and still friends. People like Will and E, Memulus and whatever. And at that time, I used to go over and hang out with Memulus at his place, George, and he had a roommate called Ham. And Ham at that point, Halal Ham, if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, he's on Misfits, isn't he?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And prior to that, he'd make sort of like music videos and stuff like that. So I'd worked with him and done loads of videos with him. So I understood at that point what it was like to work with a creator and make YouTube videos. And obviously I had all the experience of making my own YouTube videos back in the day. And I did bits with Afghan Dan. But my first day working with Brian, I remember he almost didn't want to take me on. So what ended up happening was, so he put a tweet out, I'm looking for an editor to help me on a series I'm working on. I replied with the biopic documentary, the Afghan Dan documentary. He hits me up in the DMs and he's like, great, I want to work with you. Can you get to London to pick up the footage like this Friday? And I had just come back to Blackpool because my plan was to go and work as a lifeguard, because that's what I was going to do over the summer. I'd literally passed the course the day before, like £260 I had to borrow from my mum, do the lifeguard course, work as a lifeguard throughout the summer. And I said to him, I was like, I can't come until next week because I was dead broke. Like I just didn't have the money to be able to do that. And he was like, oh, I'm gutted. I really wanted this to sort of be worked on straight away. And I was like, oh, but at that point we spoke a bit about like what he wanted from the series. A huge inspiration for him was The Defiant Ones, which is a brilliant Netflix documentary. And so we spoke a bit about it, but then he's like, oh, can you pick up the footage this Friday? I was like, I can't, because I can't come back until next week. So then he was like, I'm gutted. I wanted to be worked on straight away. So then it got to the point where I was like, I'd DM him and like ask him questions, and then he would just start replying. And this was only for like a few days. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. And I was like, right now, I was saying this to my girlfriend. I was like a 1 or a 2 in terms of like his sort of in his mind. I need to be a 10. I need to be like we have to bring this kid on kind of thing. So I remember I just took one day where I went on his channel and I took loads of random videos where he'd spoke about Conor McGregor, just because he had loads of videos at the time on podcasts or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to make a trailer to the video that we hadn't made. So I did that, put something together with like a bunch of footage or whatever, just like a trailer for the True Life Stories, send it over to him, and he messaged me back and he was like, right, you've proved your point. I'll wait till next week. And that's what we did. So my first day, he goes, can you come to Victoria? They had a studio in Victoria at the time, and you'll meet Lawrence McKenna, who's was the prior co-host of the True Geordie podcast, and he'll help you through things and stuff, because I had the whole studio there. Now I was a huge fan of the True Geordie podcast.
That must have been pretty cool.
Massive fan, and I very, very rarely get starstruck. I meet YouTubers like all the time and people all the time. Very rarely get starstruck. And it's funny because he's such a great friend now. But Lawrence McKenna was one of the first times I was like proper starstruck when I met him. So then I spent the day there, and then I was like, yeah, I can kind of just do this from home because I've got my own sort of like setup at home. So I kind of just did most of it from my laptop in my uni room. And then me and Brian worked together. I'd send things over to him. He'd send like a bunch of notes. And then it got to the point with Brian, I worked with him for 4.5 years, where like I would be able to get the edits done without any notes, because like we just knew each other's style so well, and we sort of merged a style together,
Mm-hmm.
So
and,
yeah,
and you fast forward just through that 4.5 years. Obviously, you got so many big opportunities as a result of that, and you obviously on camera a lot more. I remember last couple of years you were working for him. You were on some of his streams and some of his interviews as well.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Some of the opportunities you got to meet Adesanya, from what I remember, right?
And Francis Ngannou, yeah.
as well, right? What was that like?
Oh yeah, that was great. Obviously, as a big UFC fan, I was a bit starstruck meeting both of those guys.
More so than Lawrence.
You know what's funny? I think by that point I was a bit desensitized to meeting celebrities. Yeah. So I think I was like way more starstruck meeting Lawrence than Ngannou or Adesanya. I'm not even joking.
I'd be more terrified of Ngannou.
Oh god. Oh, well, here's the thing with Ngannou. So when Ngannou came for the True Geordie podcast, he was asking for the Wi-Fi. So I was like one of the only people in the room that knew the Wi-Fi code. So then he gave me his phone, and like just seeing like this massive hand past my tiny hand the other phone, and then I'm like, I hope I don't get it wrong or whatever, because I don't want him to be stressed out. But luckily I got it right, and it was all.
Did he have the keys the regular size, or were they enlarged? Like old people when
I don't remember that.
Yeah. I just have a feeling that his thumbs can't navigate normal iPhones.
Yeah. I think they were normal, because I would have remembered that. Yeah.
Obviously, 4.5 years, especially when you're that age as well, that's a really significant part of your life, because the older you get, obviously 4 years becomes less and less time. But when you're sort of early 20s, late teenage years, that's really sort of formulative, if you like, just as a person and in an actual career.
Yep.
When you sort of reflect on that 4 years, what were the sort of main things you took away from that sort of really shaped you as an editor moving forward? Maybe I know you touched upon there just about the efficiency, but was there other things as well that you sort of got out of that?
So there was a lot of heavy lifting during that time, because I, for the longest time, was the only editor working there. And obviously there was like, I was with him during like dark times as well, like during sort of the DM scandal back in 2019. And then more recently, during the COVID pandemic or whatever, I was the only person there. It was me and Brian. That's why I was on camera and things like that, because other people had families and whatnot, so they couldn't come on camera, whereas I was in a safe space with Brian where I could do that. There's loads I took away from it. I mean, one of the reasons I stepped away when I did is because I wanted to preserve the great times that we had. And there's a lot that I was very proud of. There was a lot of heavy lifting, so obviously that gave me the skill of doing those like late hours and things like that, and just pushing through, and reigniting sort of the passion for creating, because I had a lot of friends during that time that were trying to make it in the film industry that weren't able to do that because of lockdown. Everyone got made what's it called, furloughed? They all got furloughed. Yeah, the film industry shut down, whereas I was able to actively work during that time. But there was loads of things that I took away, man. It's kind of a hard one. Like I remember when the DMs happened, for instance, you know about the DM scandal.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, True Geordie had a big DM scandal where basically these DMs came out and it was very embarrassing DMs. We'll just say that. We don't need to go into detail.
Definitely not.
But I remember me and Brian didn't really speak for a week after that because I didn't really know what to say. And then he was like, right, we're all meeting to the studio tomorrow and we're gonna address it. And I was thinking, I don't know what we're gonna do. He ended up getting Stephen Tries to roast him basically, and Lawrence, two of the funniest people on the planet. And we made a response to the DMs in like the best way you could possibly do it if you've got a victimless scandal, which is just completely own it and make the joke on yourself. And we replied with a True News, a sponsored video, and that basically pioneered a new way of dealing with drama in this scene. And obviously, you know, as somebody who's worked in the YouTube scene now for years and obviously always been a fan of it, it feels good to be involved in sort of like a pivotal part of you know, the whole YouTube journey. And like then after he did that, we've seen other examples of other people, you know, dealing with same sort of controversies and just owning it because he did it, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one example, but there's so much I took away from it. Yeah.
So what was it that sort of drew you away from working for Brian and obviously moving to where you are now, working for Logan Paul, which is, you know, about as big as you can get in terms of the YouTube space. Obviously, in terms of production value, you've got quite sort of similar tones there. You know, very True Geordie was sort of, I would like to say he's the first sort of guy that pioneered that high production value, almost TV and film-esque standard of production. And I feel like Logan Paul definitely matches that. What were the differences in terms of creating for a guy like Brian compared to a guy like Logan?
So basically, back what you said before, like, you know, it was when I was 19, that's when I first started working with Brian. When I was 19, 4.5 years later, I realized, right, I love this job, but what I don't want to do is look back in 10 years time when I'm 30 and go, I had this great job, but I just did the same thing for like however long it was, like for like 13 years. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to kind of roll the dice because this is the time to do that, early 20s. And it was tough, but we had a new editor at that point. I sat down with Brian one day and I said, listen, like, I want to end this in a place where, you know, we're both in a good spot, because this was just before like Brian had the cancellation, which happened just after I left. And I assured him that I would train up Adam, who was the new editor, to sort of take on, you know, my responsibilities, and then we'll bring in another editor, so it didn't, you know, it wasn't sort of like a rough patch or whatever. And you know, he agreed with that. It was hard because, like, you know, we created this like great bond together, and obviously like it was like chalk and cheese at that point. And then the Logan job wasn't even on the horizon at that point. I had no idea that the Logan job was even there. My plan was to kind of just go freelance. I didn't have a plan. When I gave Brian a notice, which was more of a verbal conversation, I gave him like 6 months. And I was like, I don't really know what I want to do next, but I kind of just want to roll the dice and see where it goes from here. And then a few months later, the Logan job came up, and it was through and again a tweet. So I just applied. It wasn't as if I think some people think I got like sort of preferential treatment, like because Logan and Brian were friends.
I think that's the assumption, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, they never communicated about me whatsoever.
Because obviously they're good friends, so yeah, you can see that link.
Exactly. So I applied, like, you know, apparently I heard 10,000 people applied to that job. I don't know if that's true or not.
That would not surprise me.
Really? Yeah, I was like, when someone told me that, and I was like, I don't know if that's true or not, but I applied, and then you know what's funny? I didn't want to go working from one YouTuber full time to working with another YouTuber full time. I just felt like this is too similar, whatever. And then when I started working with Logan, the first thing I did was they sent over a bunch of footage to recreate or to create a recap video of Prime's launch in the UK. And it was so different to anything I'd done with Brian, because everything we shot on the True Geordie channel was shot in the same four walls. Yep. It was shot in the studio. We'd occasionally do other little bits, but like 99% of our content. And then working with Logan, everything we started doing then was like, there was so much variance to it. Obviously, like Prime's launch in the UK. Then the next thing I did with him was launching an NFT to space. And then before I even like found out I had the job fully, I was working with VR180 footage with Logan going around Africa with a VR180 camera. So there was so much variance to it. And then when it came to the point of me sort of like agreeing to do the job full time, I was like, yeah, you know what? I actually like this enough to be able to do it full time. So
obviously there is a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure we've got a lot to ask you in regards to that. But just jumping back a step, it's quite clear that from all these different points in your life, whether it be college, uni, moving on to that job, that you were happy to go into jobs and you were happy to take experiences from them and level yourself up and obviously just gain incredible experience in a field that you've been in for a little while. Was there, but also on the reason I say that is because you also have this other side to you where it always seems like you're happy to bet on yourself without sort of knowing the next step.
Mm-hmm.
When you started the journey, or maybe along the journey, has there ever been a North Star necessarily, or something that you've always thought, okay, this is close to, or the end destination that I want to sort of reach?
So I'm not a goal-oriented person. I know a lot of people need to use goals in order to get out of bed in the morning because they go, eventually I'll have this career, I'll do this. I always say that I set myself on trajectories and enjoy the journey, because ultimately some people will just slave away and do jobs they hate to get to goals, get there and realize this is nothing what I expected it to be. I expected it to be much better. Obviously, combat sports fans, you know about Tyson Fury when he won all the belts, and then Harris asked him, "What do you want to do now?" He's like, "I'm gonna kill myself." So it was kind of a similar situation.
Impression.
Yeah, we need a few more of those. Sorry for this process.
It's kind of like that for me. Like, I've never really gone. People go, "What's the end goal? What do you eventually want to do? Do you want to work for Mr. Beast or whatever?" And I'm like, no. Like, I just enjoy what I do. Like, what's most important for me is constantly being happy and feeling fulfilled with what I do. And if I can go to bed every night and be like, I enjoyed what I did today, then that's my goal. That's my goal hit for every day.
That's the reason why I asked you, actually, is because it was very clear over a few things that you said that it's the process and the fulfillment of what you're actually doing is what you're chasing. Very, very clear. Even what you said there with Brian, because although in hindsight, that was just an easy step and an easy jump, but if you actually rewind and put anyone that's listening to this or watching this into the perspective, you are a part of one of the biggest teams on multiple different platforms. Fantastic opportunity. You've been there 4 years, so you're established. You know how to do everything very efficiently. You're very, very quickly becoming at the top of your craft. It's very easy, like you said, to sort of look back and realize I'm 26, 27, 28, and you can sort of feel that dwindling around. And the fact that you just sort of not cut ties necessarily, but cut the job there and chase something else is quite clear that you're in love with the process. And I think for people that do what you do in regards to editing, that shows in the quality of the work when people are loving what they're doing, which sort of comes to my next question of when you made that video for Logan, was that the entire process of just, that was your sort of application? And if so, how did you go about sort of, not standing out, but how did you go about curating a video to go, right, this is how I want to put my name towards that? Because like you said, 10,000 people, I don't doubt that it was probably close to that, to be perfectly honest. And that's a lot of people to sort of illuminate yourself amongst, right?
Yeah, of course. So obviously the first thing I did wasn't like the video. It was just like an application form. That's how everyone sort of like got shortlisted, I guess. So I knew that I was already on a sort of shortlist. And also I'd met Logan a couple times before. I wouldn't say that we sort of like on name by name basis, but it was a case of like, he definitely would recognize me if he saw me. And he loved the True Geordie team because, for those who don't know, Logan used to use the True Geordie studio whenever he came to the UK to shoot Impulsive. So I'd always looked up to Hayden. So Hayden Hillier-Smith, in my opinion, is the best editor on the platform by a mile. And that's why I'll never look at myself and go, I'm the best, because Hayden always gives me something to work towards, because in my opinion, he's just so much better. And his knowledge and his passion and his love for creating content and for editing, and his knowledge is just like amazing. And obviously he did the Logan job before I did. He was Logan's editor. If you Google Logan's editor, it will come up with him. Doesn't work with him anymore, but he did. And for years I'd talk to him and stuff, and I'd like watch his content, and I would always be inspired by it. So when it came for me to then create my own sort of Logan video, I knew it was important, because Hayden was leaving, to emulate sort of his style in a way. Now, not just copying what he does, but have those techniques that he introduced and used in Logan's videos. It has to have an element of that too. So I'd watch some of my favorite Logan edits that Hayden had done, and I tried to incorporate as much of that sort of stylistic Hayden feel and Logan feel that they'd worked together to build in that, in my original edit that I sent over. And it was a similar situation as well when I, left like True Geordie, like that's what I was trying to help Adam with. So Adam, funnily enough, who's now True Geordie's sort of lead editor, he went to Blackpool Sixth Form too. He went to my uni too, but at no point did we ever talk. And
did you go at the same time?
No, he was a year below me both. So he did a different course at my uni, same, but in Blackpool Sixth Form, same course, year below me, and then he goes to University of Westminster, does a different course, and we never speak. And then he applies one day, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm from Blackpool." And we find all this out, and he was just a perfect fit, and he was able to emulate that style that me and Brian, worked together on perfectly. And I knew that was important for me to do when doing this sort of Logan video. So I really wanted to make something stand out because, if I didn't get the job, I didn't know how many people were, in the shortlist at the time. But I remember just thinking to myself, I want to give it my best shot because if I don't get the job, then that wasn't the plan anyways. I was just going to go freelance and just figure it out. So we'll just see what happens. So I remember just doing this video, and it wasn't just a video. We had like a few TikToks as well. I think it was like a 4 to 6 minute recap of Prime's launch in the UK, and then like 2 different TikToks, and I think another Prime TikTok, whatever it was. So I did all these sort of deliverables. We had 5 days to do it. I sent it over, and then for 2 weeks, I just didn't hear anything. So I was thinking, okay, they probably just moved on or whatever. Like as the days went on, I was getting less and less optimistic because I was thinking this is a fast moving industry. They're not going to waste 2 weeks and not, move on with somebody at least. But then I remember just waking up one morning and I had an email directly from Logan.
Shit.
And he was like, "Yo, bro," he's like, "Sorry, we've been a bit busy recently, but like basically like yours stands out a lot. Like stylistically, you have sort of nailed the style." And there was one thing, this video never went public, but there was one moment that I used in the video that Logan referenced that nobody else did, of just Logan and JJ having this sort of like private moment that was kind of like, it wasn't exciting, it wasn't sort of in your face, it was kind of like a raw moment. And Logan said to me like, that's the direction I want to move with the content. I don't want it to just be me going, "Yo, Logan, what's going on?" It's like, I want the raw moments, and you managed to do that. So he said, "We're still testing a few other people, but I want to give you the first sort of choice for the next edit." So then he gave me these 3 options, and I chose sending an NFT to space. Did that video, had so much fun doing that. As I said, it was very different to the style of content I would make with True Geordie. And then before I even found out I got the job, I was already on another job with him. So yeah, it sort of like led from one to another. But for me and for other editors watching this that kind of, have an opportunity to create something to make themselves stand out, just put your all into it. And yeah, only good things can come from that.
I love the fact that you mentioned Helios Smith because it's exactly where this idea came from. Because he has the editing podcast, of course. So when me and Leo were talking about sort of creating a podcast, we did it about MMA at the start, and we sort of found ourselves naturally moving towards what we were doing in our weeks with creation and building brands in the MMA space, which then became the MMA Creators Podcast, which was a direct link from watching all of his podcasts. Yeah. So I'm happy that you sort of said that, but just what you said there, obviously you wake up and you get an email. What's going through your head at that moment?
You know what? It was the same day we had the True Geordie poker tournament. So he used to have a brand deal with PokerStars, and it was that night. So I was already on like a high anyways. My dad came to stay with us because he's a big poker player. And I remember it was like a bright sunny morning in July. I just woke up and I was like, I just like routinely would check my emails every day, looking for that little red whatever. And I was like, and then I saw the Logan Paul, and I was like, oh my God. And it was directly from him too. What was going through my head? Relief mainly. And then I was thinking, right, like it's funny because at first, when I first sent the application over, if you would have said to me like, how much do you really want it? I'd kind of go, it doesn't really matter. Like, I know that I'm going to be okay freelance because I had a lot of friends who worked in the scene. But the more stages I got through, the more I wanted it, So getting that message made me really, really fucking want it. And then I knew at that point I was like one of 3 or whatever it was. And I was like, right, I'm already leading right now. I'm going to make sure this next edit is so fucking good. They have no choice but to hire me.
One thing I just want to touch on, sorry, Leo, before you...
So the emotions were relief, excitement, but also like this idea of I want to fucking go for it. Yeah.
It just makes me think, coming back to what you said a second ago about how you took inspiration from what his editor was doing already. And you also mentioned there about using that segment, which wasn't necessarily electric, it was a little bit more intimate. And when I was watching the videos, that's definitely something I picked up on, is you can see the shift in his style to now. there's a lot more times in the videos I feel where it's allowed to breathe and emotions allowed to sort of settle, and you're given time to interpret these scenes in different ways, and I that definitely stood out. So there's no surprise there. But you said you took inspiration from Hillier Smith and then adapted that to your own sense. Operationally, what does that look like? What sort of techniques or skills did you sort of lift over to then almost emulate that style a little bit in your own voice?
So it's a lot about the sound design. I feel like that's something that Hayden does very well. The way that he uses sort of like unconventional tracks. Like generally, if someone's editing a video, and especially now with sort of the Mr. Beast takeover and everyone's edits kind of look the same, the way that Hayden does things is he lets things breathe. He uses sort of like, you know, the kind of music that you would hear in like an orchestra and violins and strings and the things that you would hear, you know, that are kind of almost juxtapositional, like not what you would expect. Rises I would use, which are sort of like those noises. So impact sounds, all about the sound effects and sound design, because I feel like that is something that gets so neglected, especially by new editors and inexperienced editors, and it makes your edit stand out if you can create something that you don't need to watch. You can just close your eyes and have the same experience. And also what Hayden's really good at is invisible editing. So when you're watching a Logan video or something that Hayden's done, you aren't like, unless you're an editor, unless you're actually looking for it, you aren't even aware it's been edited. You know, that's not in your face. I don't like the kind of editing. I know that people enjoy this, and Mr. Beast has obviously made it very popular, where you're constantly reminded this video has been edited. You're constantly, it's subtitles, it's fucking like glitch effects, it's like frames and filters and memes and all these different things. Obviously, there's a place and a time for some of those things, but something that I try to emulate with in Hayden's style is that invisible editing, where, because for me it's super important that the editor and the creator and the audience, a video needs to be a direct communication and connection between those two, and the editor is almost a third wheel that kind of needs to just be quiet.
The glue almost.
The glue, but they don't have to be prominent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you'll never see me sort of put myself in an edit where it will like cut away and it'll be me editing the thing, because I feel like it's kind of like I need to be behind the curtain. You know what I mean? And I need to be an editor that creates the content that's enjoyable but not obvious that it's been edited.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main thing I took away from Hayden, is just really good emotive stuff like the music and the sound effects, but just more subtle and not in your face.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head with the sort of Mr. Beastification. I think that's the term that people use these days. It's just in your face, constant, and that sort of blends in with the TikTok and short form content. People's attention spans are so thin these days, and no one lets any room to breathe in their videos.
Yeah.
And that's something I try and do with my videos. It's sort of less is more, I guess is the phrase to use.
Exactly. That summarizes everything I've just said. Less is more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously learning from scratch is, you know, that's, I didn't look up any guides. I just sort of go with what I think works with my sort of mini documentary style videos. Obviously a bit of a contrast with what you did with your Super Bowl ad, which we had to get into. Because obviously that, you know, you have such a limited amount of time. You know, every second is worth, you know, there's probably a number for it, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it has to be in your face. It has to be fast paced. What was that experience like? Not just for the final product and how fast that was, but I'm sure the time frame was quite small as well. You didn't have long to make it. Maybe I'm wrong there. But.
No. So we had around 2 weeks before we had to actually submit it. So I knew that Logan was doing a Super Bowl for Prime. He had told me just before January, but I didn't think I was going to be editing it. Like, I just thought they're going to have a team of people doing it, whatever. Like, I'm sure they'll create something great. And I saw them out filming some stuff that I assumed was for the Super Bowl. And then I remember just one night randomly, Logan sends me a voice message where he goes, basically, you know, this edit that you did once for Prime, where basically he asked me to do an edit. One of the first things I did when I started was like, he goes, oh yeah, we've got this like, what do you call them? Like the retailer, we've got a retailers meeting and we kind of want to show them a sizzle of Prime. So sizzle, for those who don't know, is kind of like a 45 to 60 second thing where you show off the brand and all the highlights of the brand or whatever. So I got all this footage together and I just spent like a couple of days putting together this nice montage of Prime's success. And he said, yeah, basically the edit you made, we kind of want to repurpose that and just change it a bit. And that's going to basically be the Super Bowl commercial. So basically, bro, I'm asking you, you're doing a fucking Super Bowl commercial. Crazy. And it was just like late at night. And then I was like, oh my God, like this is going to change my CV for life.
I was gonna say, I'm out on your CV. You're set.
You know what I mean? Because and then the difference is obviously, you know, Coca-Cola and all these different huge brands that get the Super Bowl commercials every year, they have a whole team, a whole department that is dedicated on creating a Super Bowl commercial because it costs, I don't know exactly how much it is.
It's ridiculous.
Millions just for a 30-second spot. So they're thinking, if we're spending this money, we need to make sure that we get the best outcome, and we make sure like we have something that's viral, we have something that's like, you know, super engaging or unique in whatever way. So because we had so little time, we had like 2 weeks to pull it together, which sounds like, you know, a long time for a 30-second ad, but me and Logan just went back and forth, frame by frame, all these different things just to go over it and just try to make it as best as we could. Yeah, I remember just we finished it. It was literally like this time last year. We finalized it and we finished it, and it played at the Super Bowl. And I was in France at the time, and I was like trying to get it on a stream, and it wasn't working, so I missed it. Oh. And my sister messaged me within the 30 seconds it was playing, saying, "What time's the Super Bowl ad on?" And I was like, "It's on now." She's like, "What do you mean it's on now?"
It's on now.
And then because I was asking my girlfriend, she was on Twitter. I was like, check if people talking about it, and then people are referencing the Markiplier bit at the end. So I was like, okay, I know that it's been on now. But yeah, it was like for me, because the thing is, I wouldn't have watched the Super Bowl otherwise. I'm not into NFL or whatever. But I know the significance of a Super Bowl ad because, I mean, I think everyone does. If you work in advertising, the number one thing you can ever aspire to do really is create a Super Bowl ad. And I had the benefit and obviously the pleasure by Logan to create a Super Bowl ad in my bedroom.
I think the crazy thing for that is if anyone's listening, anyone from the UK, like you said, most people don't watch NFL, but I'm sure that they know the significance of the Super Bowl. The reason why that was always significant is obviously biggest event in America, one of the most watched events. But I actually believe nowadays it's maybe even more of a highlighted opportunity, because in this world where we constantly watch TV on replays and records and we're on TikTok and YouTube and all these things that aren't live, what every platform wants is live sport because you have to watch it there and then. So I feel like almost now that the Super Bowl ad has always been this humongous opportunity, but I feel like now it may even be bigger because we don't have a lot of times in our life where we're actually concentrated onto watching a live event, which is just incredible anyway. And one thing which you actually forgot to mention, which you spoke about there on, you forgot to say, about True Geordie, you said you had this sort of pivotal point in your career where you was a point of history almost in reference to the negative, but also again with the Super Bowl ad, is like, yes, that is obviously a phenomenal achievement. But one thing that you didn't even mention was that was the first creator-led business, right? Which sort of goes to speak about not only the opportunity it gave you, but Logan Paul as an entrepreneur and as a creator and the sort of conversations he's in. Was there a moment in that where you sort of sat back a little bit and thought, okay, this is quite a big opportunity? Or was it so fast paced you were just in the trenches of it?
When I first got told I was doing a Super Bowl ad, there was definitely a moment where I was like, I remember it was late at night. I think it might have been like 1 a.m. and I was just wide awake after that. Do you know what I mean? I knew that I had to like
the adrenaline just flowing.
Yeah, like start getting the footage together and stuff and getting the timeline set and just being like, okay, where do we even like begin? Obviously, I'd already done the edit that it was inspired off anyway, so I had that to go off, but that wasn't going to be the final thing. So that edit was like a minute long, and for the Super Bowl ad, it had to be 30 seconds. So we had to, like, you know, me and Logan went back and forth, and the process is so funny because I remember when I was at Blackpool Sixth Form creating media production course, shout out again. We did a what do you call it, like a bit a
trailer.
No, what's it called? Like a semester. I want to say semester, but it's too American sounding. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We did something on a module.
A
module.
Yeah.
We did a module
what
on
school.
Yeah.
I don't even know anymore.
We did module on television advertising, and
Perfect.
I remember us like learning about it and stuff, and then like the process of creating my television advert when I was back at on sixth form was very similar to the process of doing the Super Bowl commercial. Wow. It was pretty much exactly the same.
Which is what?
Which is, it was just me and Logan doing it. Like back then, it was like me and my friend Josh or whatever doing the television commercial of my dad being a homeless man and drinking out of a Starbucks cup that was for the fake Starbucks. That creative process was almost identical to then however many years later of me and Logan being overseas doing it over text, creating the Super Bowl ad together.
I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it? It speaks volumes to the contrast.
It wasn't a whole department of people, because if you go to Coca-Cola or Macy's, whatever company that's got a Super Bowl advert, they'll have a full team of people that have been working on for months on it. And I assume it's like that. And then it was just me and Logan. Literally, we were the only ones to give any sort of creative input into that Super Bowl commercial. And then it came round to us having to submit it to Fox. And it was interesting because Fox were asking for all this technical stuff. Like, they were asking for like ISKI codes. And I was like, I have no idea what any of this is. Like, I'm literally just like, well, I didn't say this, but I don't come from an advertising background. So I had to learn a lot.
My kid point. In my bedroom.
And the guy realized pretty quickly, he was like, it has to have like this slate at the beginning and this amount of black space at the end and whatever, and you've got to have it in this file type, and it's got to be named this specific thing. And I had to learn a lot about advertising. But it was fun.
Different ball game.
I think that's the sort of beauty in what you just said there, is what you touched on at the start, and it's almost come full circle, is there's so much information that you can overload with advertising and marketing and content creation that sometimes what's lost is the essence of creating something people want to watch, right? And just in that process, obviously you said it was a very simple process. Are you trying to reverse engineer it? So you're thinking, what is going to keep people the most engaged? Are you trying to hit sort of certain touch points? Or are you thinking, right, this is the story we want to tell and I'm going to tell it to the best of my ability?
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of people do that. And obviously Hayden's really good at doing that, where he's able to like watch one of his edits back and go, I use this technique here and I've done this here, and reverse engineer things. Generally, my mind doesn't work like that when I'm creating something. I'm not thinking, right, how do I keep people engaged, really?
Yep.
I just, what feels natural to me is what I end up doing. And
it's hard to break out of that.
Exactly. And I don't, and then maybe you can watch it back and we could go through the Super Bowl commercial and I could pretend I did this because of this and this because of this, but ultimately it would all be bullshit, because I kind of just did what felt right at the time. And me and Logan went through all these different options for different moments, and he re-recorded bits, and I don't know. I wouldn't say there was anything where we sat and was like, no, we need to keep people engaged. We wanted to really just show off Prime's success in the year that they had, and do it in a way that didn't feel like a Super Bowl commercial. It got a bit of criticism when it came out, because I think people expected a cinematic kind of like not generic Super Bowl commercial, but
on brand with what they're used to seeing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like because Super Bowl commercials generally aren't that kind of thing. They're usually like a little, like almost like a film trailer or a scene from a film, whereas ours felt a lot more like a YouTube commercial.
And that's how it should be. It can never be like, you know, the conventional ads, because at the end of the day, Logan Paul's Logan Paul, and he's, you know, you're going to do it that way because you technically you and him are YouTubers. It's got to be different. Yeah. And that's what makes it stand out.
Of course.
And that's why it's successful. Yeah,
it definitely did stand out. And going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about shooting on iPhones, I don't know if that is even going to be in the cut or whatever. But like some of that Super Bowl commercial was footage from iPhones. So, you know what I mean? It's not like we're shooting on like red cameras or anything like that. Obviously, a lot of it was shot by shout out Kevin. Like, he goes around with Logan and shoots all the great content. And the vast majority of it was that good quality footage. But we also had some footage in there from just like kids that were at the Prime event just filming the bus when they were all throwing like the Prime off the bus and stuff.
Crazy.
You know?
I think that's sort of what you touched upon earlier is, I think, especially now, I've personally seen it, and maybe you have as well, but I've found that across a lot of platforms, and most noticeably TikTok, just because I tend to spend more time on that, there's becoming a lot more of a priority on authenticity. And like you said, the more natural, the more invisible you can sort of make. Sam Sulek is probably the best example, right?
Bro, I'm obsessed with Sam Sulek.
I don't even watch him, but even then you can still appreciate just there's barely anything to it. That's why it's so successful. Yeah, it's raw.
And I watched him for 40 minutes.
And I think this is what's so important now, and I think that's the sort of change that we're sort of seeing. We had that period in content creation where, okay, new cameras came about and new editing software, and people start getting really good, and all of these things started just become Mr. Beastification, right? Mr. Beastification. So we were very used to this, and we were almost conditioned to believe that if we want to be successful on these platforms, that's what we need, and people's attention spans are changing. I don't subscribe to people have short attention spans. I just believe people have a lot of options for value. So if you're not providing value constantly, they'll go elsewhere for their dopamine. Someone like Sam Sulek gives you value throughout. right? And does it in a very authentic way where it's soothing, it's calming, and you can almost keep up with the story.
One thing which you touched upon earlier, which I thought was kind of interesting, is you said it's not a meticulous thought process of, okay, I'm trying to use this technique and this technique. I think sometimes that's very similar to mixed martial artists, right? When they have a fight and people break it down post and they say, what are you talking about? I just went out there and the reaction.
You're right, yeah.
It's a flow state.
Yeah.
And once you get it so many reps in something, and once you start curating a vision that you know after many years, you go into a flow state. So you're not intentionally creating this hook and this draw and this riser and these things. You're doing it subconsciously. But if someone was to critique it and break it down, they'd be able to sort of unpick all of that.
Yeah, I said that, and that's the best way I've ever heard it described, and that's how I've always been depicted. That's why I keep saying it. That is incredible. The way that you just summarized that. I did a breakdown with Hayden, and there was just one bit in a video I did for Logan when he had this fight against Dylan Dennis recently, and there's a bit at the end of the video where he goes, you know what, I think I just need to chill, and then the next shot is him in an ice bath, and then Hayden was like, did you not do that intentionally? I was like, no.
Yeah, that's good. It almost, when you say you haven't done it, you haven't done it intentionally, it almost downplays your ability, but that's just because so many reps and so many times you've built up such an incredible muscle for it that it's second nature.
Yeah.
To someone else that's really scrutinizing that's incredible.
Obviously, we were talking about the Super Bowl commercial and the sort of opportunity that come from that. I just wanted to get your opinion on Logan as himself, because obviously, in regards to the social media space, that's as big as it comes, right? In regards to content creators. And he actually, when you go and watch the Jake Paul documentary on Netflix, which was incredible, I think you get a lot better perspective to understand that they very much pioneered this industry. They very much pioneered this space, whether it's content creation, even the boxing scene.
Yep.
So many elements which are so prevalent in all of our lives nowadays. I think sometimes what's missed because he's so divisive is what an incredible entrepreneur he is. Just spending that much time around him. Is there anything that you've sort of picked up with him on a day-to-day, just in regards to maybe what makes him the achiever that he probably is at the moment, or definitely is at the moment?
I think the main thing that surprises me about Logan is, one, how hands-on he is. So I remember when we used to work with him to shoot the impulsive stuff. He when I used to work with Brian, we used to have the studio. He would we'd always go through like a producer. We never really go directly with Logan. Yeah. So I assumed when I started working with him, I was going to be going through somebody to get to him or whatever, and it was never going to be a direct thing because the guy is he's like a household name. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's got WWE, he's got Prime, he's got all these different things. There's no way that he's going to be sitting and giving me notes on an edit in the same way that Brian was. Yeah. But he does. Like, he literally, we do everything, as I mentioned before about the Super Bowl commercial, we do everything one-on-one. And so that's the main thing, how hands-on he is. And I feel like that's super important, and is something that gets lost a bit when people get bigger and bigger. You know, like Mr. Beast, for instance. I don't know exactly how he works, but he's got full teams of people. And the other thing is Logan genuinely loves what he does. He genuinely loves creating content. He's been doing it since day one. Like, even before like TikTok and Vine, obviously before TikTok, but before Vine, him and Jake would like just make videos in the same way that like me and my sister and my cousins would create videos when we were younger with like our like little like Sony Handycams and things like that. So that's what he has that like I guess sort of separates him and makes him just so good at what he does, because he genuinely loves it. Because a lot of people get involved in the space because they see the money or whatever. Whereas he just genuinely loves it. He likes being hands-on. And even though he's at a point that so many people couldn't even dream of being, he's still working hard to push himself further and further and further and further, and just trying to do all these different things and be the best at all of them. Like, he can't just have a hydration beverage. It's got to be the number one hydration beverage in the world. And he's rivaling PepsiCo and Coca-Cola and all these different ones. He can't just be a WWE fighter. He has to be a WWE champion. He's got to be the best at everything. And that rubs off on me in a way that it inspires me, because like seeing somebody like that you work for work so hard makes you get out of bed in the morning and go, right, I really want to put everything into this video now, because I want to be able to match that and work on that sort of same same rhythm. And there's a few times where I've had the pleasure of like being with him in person since I started working with him. And one time I did was last year in July, he fought at Money in the Bank, which is a kind of big WWE event in the O2 Arena just across the road from my house. And I was just with him for a short period of time. He did the match. I watched the match ringside, and like it's insane the amount of like
crazy.
the physical
athleticism.
People do not appreciate that enough. I'm not even big on WWE, but you can still appreciate the absolute. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
It's incredible. Like it was a ladder match, and I didn't know what a ladder match was until I got there and I saw the actual ladders, and it was right next to me. They're proper ladders, and the slams and all the things they were doing. If I did half of that stuff, I would be in hospital for weeks. So Logan was able to do all of that, finish, go in the back. We were in the locker room, and then straight away get in a taxi and shoot an Impulsive episode. Shot a full 2-hour Impulsive episode, goes to bed, wakes up first thing in the morning, gets a jet to Italy and proposes to his girlfriend. Like, that's the kind of pace this guy works on. It's just like a crazy, crazy pace. And it's just super inspiring.
I think what I thought you were going to go with that is when a similar one is when he performed in WWE, which, like you said, in itself is, and like you, only recently have I, as I learn more about it and sort of listen to people that have been in that space a little bit more, you realize the physical demands and the 365-day-a-year physical demands that sport's in. And I think sometimes as MMA fans, it's very easy to think, oh, well, that's not full contact. Doesn't really matter the impact that these guys are sort of playing with. But also similar to that is when he went from there and then flew straight to his brother's boxing match.
Yeah, that's crazy.
On a private jet. And then it just sort of, obviously, that in itself is very impressive, but
he doesn't have that thing in his mind where he goes, you know what, I've done enough now. I'm going to chill and pat myself on the back. He just doesn't have that. He's like, right, done that, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because he just loves progressing. He just loves to be constantly working. He is a workaholic. And I've known a lot of people in the scene that talk about how hard they work, but they just don't work anywhere near as hard as they think they do.
That's why he's at the top.
And that's why he's at the top. Like, for instance, I remember the night he beat Dylan Dennis, obviously leading up to the whole Dylan Dennis fight, there was so much that went into that in terms of like physically from Logan, emotionally because of all the situation that was going on with Nina at the time. He finishes, he does the match that night, beats Dylan Dennis, and then would go to the house afterwards, and then I found out that night that in less than a month's time he's fighting Rey Mysterio for the US title. I was like, when does this guy stop? He just doesn't stop. He's just constant all the time, and that sort of like fast pace nature of what he's like is like super inspiring, you know?
Yeah.
That kind of makes me, I just thought of it as I was saying it there. It just makes me realize as well what I touched upon with the documentary is you have a look at them as brothers and just what they're doing in similar spaces, but not identical, just at the pinnacle of absolutely everything. For yourself, obviously you're around these people so much, and you said you feel inspired by them. Are there sort of main takeaways that you've taken from these people that are obviously so wildly successful in their respective disciplines, other than maybe just the motivation that sort of gives you a little bit on a day-to-day?
I mean, there's various things that happen over time. I would say a big one with Logan is he doesn't sort of self-victimize himself. He never feels sorry for himself. He's always sort of, he's very, I don't know how to say this. He's not an overly emotional guy. And I think he surrounds himself with like, you know, people that are sort of like Mike and keep him in check and things like that. So I guess the main thing would be sort of like not being like super sort of self-victimized. I don't like people that feel sorry for themselves. You know what I mean? I feel like you just got to move on with stuff sometimes. And I feel like that's something that he helps me with. Apart from that, just the idea that people like need to celebrate the fact that they've worked so hard, so they take time off and they need to have a break. It's like, if you genuinely love what you do, then it doesn't feel like work. And for me, it's the same sort of thing. Like, some people will be like, why are you spending hours and hours and hours doing this? Why are you sort of sacrificing A, B, and C and not doing whatever? And it's like, because I just genuinely love doing this. You
said there about that's obviously a good point, and you hear that so much in regards to sacrifice, and it's a buzzword we hear a lot when we hear people successful in their respective disciplines. When you were growing up, or even just a few years ago, just in this process, did you always have friends and family which were very supportive of you and they sort of knew, right, okay, this is what you want to do and this is the sort of time restraints? Or did you have sort of exterior factors, maybe like friendship circles? Oh, let's go out here for this weekend, or you're at uni and maybe you've got a project, or let's go and do this. Or was there sort of, did you find a balance for you personally? Because everyone's different, really.
So in terms of friends, I always try and surround myself with people that like understand what I do and therefore don't. I hate obligations. Like I hate like saying yes, I'll do this. I'll go to this event, or go to this sort of wedding or whatever like that. So people understand, you know, Gio's going to be busy. And in terms of family, my dad was a circus acrobat. So
Of course he was.
yeah, when I was a circus
Of course he
acrobat.
was.
My mom moved to America when she was younger, traveled around America, and they both lived very unconventional lifestyles. So they've never said to me, maybe you should rethink this.
No, I'm not surprised.
And like from a young age and stuff, my parents have been nothing but like super supportive. So
That's good.
and the biggest rock in my life is my girlfriend. So we've been together coming up to 10 years now.
Wow.
So she's been with me since just after high school, moved to London with me, and she basically like creates an environment for me where I don't need to really worry about cleaning. I don't need to worry about like being fed, because she sorts all that out for me and allows me just to focus on work and stuff. And then she obviously reaps the benefits of that too, because I'm able to, now that I work completely remotely as well, we can go away to like Italy, and we can go away to like France and stuff, and we're coming to America soon. So, you know, she gets the benefits too. But I it's important for me to surround myself with people that understand that work is a huge priority in my life. Not when I have kids and stuff, my life will change, my priorities will shift. But right now, being in my still early 20s, I'm 25, that work, this is the time to work, and this is the time to push myself.
100% agree. I think these are the perfect years where we do have less responsibilities to grind. And then when we're early 30s and we're still young and our life's not even started, we've almost lived a life, we've lived a career. And then people are looking at us, maybe they're sort of stuck in that sort of conventional job, and maybe they feel a little bit unfulfilled and they think, oh, don't know what to do next. Just before we wrap up and just before we do, like, thank you for your time. I really appreciate
It's
it.
been one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done.
Because honestly, when Leo said you were coming on, we've interviewed a few people, but I was super excited when I saw your name, to be perfectly honest. Really excited just to dig into what you do and sort of hear the logistics, and even just understanding you a little bit better now. It's so clear that the overarching theme for everything you do is passion.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing, and I think that's where it's led you. I don't think it's you got lucky opportunities or a little bit. I think it's the passion, which is ultimately everything's been a knock-on effect. But before we wrap up, just want to get your thoughts on a couple of fights. We'll end it quite easy.
Okay.
Just do a few little predictions. So we'll go as chronologically as my brain can sort of process these. So I'll chuck them out. Give me your little assessment in a couple of sentences. So let's start with Alexander Volkanovski, Ilia Topuria.
Ilia Topuria is a very, very good fighter, and is someone that doesn't really get, I guess, the credence, especially from casual fans, that he should. Although Volk in that division is just unstoppable, and I feel like as good as Topuria is, there has been times where he's been caught, and there's been times, you know, where he's not looked the best. Although he has taken out some killers, hasn't he? Like,
It's so
Ryan
tough to
Hall.
call, man.
And obviously, I watched him. The first person I ever saw got knocked out cold when he knocked out
Jai
Jai
Herbert.
Herbert.
Yeah, were you there as well?
Yeah,
I was there.
We all three of us
Yeah,
were there.
I was
yeah.
there as well.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just seeing the
Oh,
like
mate.
him just go out cold was very brutal. I just feel like, as much as, you know, it's going to be a striking war, Volk is just too good in that division, and he's somebody that like will make the best fighters he'll just nullify them to not look as good. You know, we saw him what he did against Holloway, especially in that last fight. More recently against Yair Rodriguez, Ortega. Like, unless you've got something that's going to put Volk in a dangerous situation, like obviously Ortega had, or you've got the power and the precision of Islam Makhachev to get him out of there. Although that was at 155 with a 2-week camp or whatever.
Yeah.
Full camp Volkanovski with a point to prove is almost invincible, and he's sponsored by Prime, so Volkanovski
He's in his prime. That's what he says.
He's in his prime.
Sugar Show versus Chito Vera.
Oh, I think quite comfortably. I think we know what happens there. I mean,
Yeah,
Chito
with you.
Vera is a very good fighter, but he got outclassed not too long ago by Sandhagen, and you know, they obviously, you know, he won the first fight against Sean, but we know what happened there. It's because of his leg going. Sean surprised everyone recently with knocking out Aljamain Sterling. Nobody has been able to do that to a fighter like Aljamain Sterling, and I just feel like Sean has the UFC were very smart with him. They didn't throw him to the lion straight away. They gave him sort of like the lesser known fighters and worked his way up and allowed him opportunities to prove himself, like against the sort of the more recently against like Pedro Munoz, and then who did he fight before? Jan, Pure Jan. That was something that it was a very close fight, but like he proved at that point that he belonged at the top of that division. So going up against Cheeto, I just feel like Cheeto doesn't belong there because we just saw what happened against.
He's not championship level.
Yeah, he knocked out Dominic Cruz. That was a great moment for him, and he's looked okay. And I just feel like Sean's just too good, so I think Sean retains.
And the last one, arguably the biggest one, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje.
Oh wow, the BMF. The BMF belt is on the line. Here's the problem with Max Holloway. He's so great at featherweight, and obviously he's just such a great striker. I mean, doesn't he still hold the records for the most significant strikes in UFC history?
In one fight,
The best boxer in UFC, man.
Delivered and absorbed. He holds a record for significant strikes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Crazy.
And Justin Gaethje. But the thing is, Justin Gaethje over the past few years has become really, really, really good. And
that physique fight.
Exactly. And the physique fight was amazing. Were you there as well for that?
Yeah.
I was literally, we were blessed by Prime to be cage side for that. So just see, Gaethje literally did the backflip like just where we were. It was amazing. But Gaethje has improved significantly over the past few years, and we've seen that in the rematch with Poirier. If you compare the Gaethje that fought Poirier last time to the Gaethje that fought Poirier the first time, it's night and day. And I feel like coming up short a couple of times against Khabib for the title, and then obviously against Oliveira for the title, he wants to make a point and make a statement. And I feel like Holloway, he's just not his natural weight class. Obviously, he's tried before at 150, 155, and he's had some good, wins there. I think it's going to be a close fight. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. But I think Justin Gaethje just gets it,
Perfect. Well, that is a good place to wrap up. Gio, once again, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem. It's been a
pleasure. That was a thoroughly enjoyable episode. I hope you all took a good amount of information from that. And that is episode 39 of the MMA Creators Podcast.